There were two big lessons that I learned. One with my side project, and my perception was, let's sell the paid plan for $1.
We're going to unlock the secrets of effective software pricing with Vova Feldman, the founder and CEO of Freemius.
Then I started to experiment, increase it $2. I had this kind of assumption that if I will price it very low, it will remove the whole price concern in the decision making, but it didn't. This was one kind of lesson learned, that if you sell something for $1, doesn't mean anything.
All the way back in 2011, Vova was doing enterprise sales where he learned how important it is to tailor a price to a buyer.
Back then I was CTO. I was in a startup accelerator in the Silicon Valley. The product that we've been building back then was SaaS. I had this meeting with Orange, one of the biggest telecom companies in the world.
We're going to talk about the easiest way for you to grow your business.
Then I'm sitting in this room doing the presentation. I'm switching to the price. The immediate reaction of everyone, they started to laugh. And the presentation was really good until that point. Exactly. What's happening? What's going on? The perception is that it was too low. Let's do it again. And I had another meeting with Netflix, added a bunch of zeros. I revealed the prices, and there was like a reasonable nudging. That was, another lesson.
Vova, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Patrick. I'm really excited to be here as a guest.
Yes, as a guest. Yes, you normally get to watch the show and listen to the show, but now you get to participate.
For sure.
So I want to start with, I gave a little bit of the history, the context. You've been doing something related to pricing for over a decade, but what's interesting to you about software pricing, and especially software pricing?
I think there are many interesting stuff, but the primary one is the things that related to psychology, I would say. A lot about putting yourself in the shoes of a buyer and trying to envision their experience. I think in general, psychology, understanding how people think, is something that very interesting to me. I got into pricing kind of by chance. You mentioned enterprise sales. I'm not a sales guy or something, but there was a period where I was in a startup accelerator in the Silicon Valley, and my co-founder, back then I was CTO, he was a CEO. He couldn't join the program for personal reasons. And the product that we've been building back then was SaaS for enterprises. So I had two options. One is sit and code, but we're in a startup accelerator, so it's not the best way kind of to use that time. The second one is to, get into my co-founder's shoes and do whatever is needed with the help of, mentorship from the program and everything. So I jumped into the water. It was scary, honestly, but I learned tons of things from that. And that was kind of my first experience into pricing and seeing how people react when they see numbers in different contexts, I would say. So the story from there was that we had some pricing in mind that we come up with based on, looking on our competitive landscape or something like that. And I went and started to pitch those numbers and, our value proposition to different companies. And I had this meeting with France Telecom, or Orange, which is like one of the biggest telecom companies in the world. And I got into this room with 6 VPs and like crazy. And I'm like, it's Vova, what I'm doing here? I'm a developer, let me code. And I'm sitting in this room and kind of pitching, doing the presentation of what we do. And then we got to the pricing slide in the end. It was kind of in the appendix. And when I switch to that slide, they ask me, okay, what is the pricing? And I'm switching to the price. The immediate reaction of everyone, they started to laugh. And the presentation was really good until that point. And I'm looking at your face, and this was my face. What's happening? What's going on? But the perception is that it was too low. It was like ridiculous numbers when it comes to enterprise sales. So that's how we started. And then I talked with my co-founder. We did some, lessons learned from that, added a bunch of zeros to the numbers. And I had another meeting with Netflix like a few days later. And the same concept, not many VPs, but, the right person there. And I revealed the prices, and there was like a reasonable nudging that suddenly everything makes sense. And we simply, added, I think, like 2 zeros to all the numbers. There were like a bunch of tiers there. We didn't close the deal, but
Uh-huh.
still, that was kind of okay. There is a lot of meaning to these numbers.
I'm processing this. So 2 zeros is a lot, right? So in one case, you were not laughed out of the room, but you were, it was like, I guess my
They were
impression
like
was,
giggling, kind
yeah,
of like what's going on. It doesn't look serious,
it doesn't
You
look. I
need,
was that was what I was thinking. Is in
yeah,
enterprise sales, I think the assumption is you don't understand how enterprises work and all the work that goes involved. Where and then at Netflix, a couple days later, you added 2 zeros to the price, and you were taken. No, you didn't win the contract, but you were at least taken seriously. You weren't laughed at. That
yep,
is wild. That is wild. If you're giving me a price that's way too low or way too high, it kind of there's an assumption as the buyer that you don't understand what you're talking about. Is that kind of like one of the maybe the principal things of pricing is anything way too high, anything way too low, and it's like, oh, this is probably the wrong fit.
absolutely. And this
Yeah.
is the psychology that goes behind pricing. When people look at numbers of something, they have some perception. They already come with some bias because our brains is, we're comparing everything. This is our way to kind of evaluate if something is cheap, expensive, or priced
hmm
correctly based on historical stuff that we saw.
So sorry. I'm gonna take a little tangent here. There's an excellent I listened to a podcast about how I think it was the Quakers in the United States. They were the people who standardized prices. So before that, you would go into a grocery store, and the grocers would charge the rich people more for the groceries than the poor people, and it was about bartering and how much time you spend bartering and stuff like that. But basically, for most of human history, prices have been variable. Oh, you're the emperor, we're going to charge you this much. Oh, you're a peasant, we're going to charge you this much. And it's interesting that I think that's a mindset that not a lot of people break out of is you can have different prices for different people. And of course you can have for enterprise you get a big enterprise contract, you hire one or two more support people who only work on enterprise, but you can still give them a price that's inflated by 2 zeros for essentially the same service plus some extra support people to make sure that they're always being tended to.
I
That
think what you described is
Yeah,
still the same. You have luxury products that are
yeah,
targeting rich people because they have a luxury brand.
yeah,
So you can still buy, top-notch quality products that are not luxury in fraction of the price.
yeah.
But if you go to buy Prada or whatever, it's adjusted to the audience. You need to understand your target audience.
Yeah, I think that so pricing is super interesting to me and super confusing. And I've been involved in a couple pricing conversations at a couple different software companies. And I think one of the first things I think about with pricing is how much of this is just guesswork. Like just throw a number at a wall and see what happens. Again, I've been in some pricing conversations and it really feels like maybe we were doing pricing wrong at the companies that I was at, but it seems like maybe 50% of it is just guessing. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's a great question. And I think that many times this is how it starts.
Mm,
When we, going back to that product and Silicon Valley and what I mentioned, this is how we probably, picked our prices. It was guesswork. And then based on the feedback that we received, we started to adjust it.
hmm
But like today, I understand that there is like methodology how to structure your prices, how to think about it. So I will throw some ideas, and we can cover them.
hmm
You need to understand your target audience. We mentioned that, right? We need to understand their budget. We need to understand how they think. Another point that it's worth mentioning is value-based pricing.
hmm
So if you can quantify the value of your product and charge less than what is valued, then it's also easier to market and make that sale. What I mean by that is, for example, if you know that you target uh, um, e-commerce stores, for the sake of the example, that are making 10 grand and above, because that's your target audience per month, and you know that your solution increases conversion by 5%. So you can literally know how much money like what would be the impact on your target audience. So if you charge less than that, it should be a no-brainer. Of course, you need to look on your competitive ecosystem and everything. You can't be blind if you have competitors that are charging a fraction of the price. With that said, if you don't have competitors, you can also set up the prices because you're the only one in the market. So competitive landscape matters a lot in the equation. So very niche products have the privilege to charge higher than if they're, and it's trivial, the more competition you have, things like you need to be more competitive. So this was one example, the 5%. Another thing, if you know your product saving time to the people you are targeting, and it saves your audience, I don't know, 10 hours per month. So you can quantify what is an hour of an average buyer from your end and offer something that would still make sense to them. Yeah. So this is just few ideas of how you can approach pricing in a more methodological way rather than, as you said, guesswork. Yeah. But in the end of the day, it's experimentation. Like you need to see how the market reacts to your numbers and optimize it.
So let me share one specific example, which I think is interesting. So I was at one company and we had one basic, so we had a free tier for everything's free. And then there's a premium tier. And then there was an enterprise tier, but that's like 1% of sales. So let's ignore that for a second. But it's basically free and premium. And then we're like, you know what? There's probably some differentiation here. There's probably some price discrimination here. We want to split these into two separate tiers. So one slightly cheaper, and then one that was, I don't know, an extra $100 or an extra $200 or something a month for extra features, yada, yada. And we spent months of work. We updated the pricing pages, and I was updating all the content on the website and doing all this stuff. And we run this pricing change. And in the end, the revenue we wanted to see a revenue increase of 20% or something. And in the end, the revenue increase was 0. It was almost unbelievably exactly the same as it was before, except now we have two different tiers. And to be fair, we have slightly fewer customers, so slightly fewer support requests, right? We're getting paid slightly more per customer on average. But we did all this. It feels like guesswork, and then we were wrong. So I guess my question for you is, if it is guesswork, how do you experiment with pricing? Because that was months of work, and then we didn't quite see the results we wanted. How do you make it go faster so that you can experiment more? Does that make sense?
Yep. So before jumping into experimentation, you also mentioned support, and this one is also important to include in the calculations because some products are very support or attention heavy, from you in terms of resources. So you definitely need to incorporate that into your calculations. In terms of experimentation, I don't know why you spend months on pricing. I don't know if it was about thinking about the prices or adjusting the product itself to facilitate those different tiers. Maybe that was the work that went, I don't know, but honestly, to experiment fast with pricing, you can just, without changing the product, let's say you have one offering, one paid version, right? You just introduce whatever additional, if you want to package or change the numbers and show different marketing materials. Maybe you say that this, a lower tier, suddenly don't include all your features, but without really protecting them, just to see how people react, right? So as long as you grandfather your existing customers, it's not like your customers get into your website and check the pricing every day, right. And also it's legit for you to change pricing over time. You don't necessarily have to announce that every time before, especially not during experimentation. So if I were in your shoes in that experiment, again, I don't know all the details and why it took 2 months. I would just go to the page builder that you've been working with, whatever, add that new package and see how people react. So you can fake it until you figure it out. It's the fundamentals of the lean startup methodology. You don't have to have the back end,
Mhm.
right? You just want to see or run the experiment as fast as possible, to see how your assumptions, to,
Yeah.
to validate your assumptions,
You
basically.
know, so I think I'm learning something from this, and I think I'd take something away from this in the future. I think the core problem was we were just very confident, and if we increase price, there's demand for our product. So if we increase prices, most people will still buy, and we just kind of assumed that. And so we started updating. Been in business for a while, and so there's so many pages of content that had to be updated that referenced old, like going from one plan to two plans. I think we might have renamed them too. So like we had to change the names of all the plans across dozens of pages. And you know what? Here's what we should have done. We should have tried the new plan, added it, and then see if anyone buys it, or a reasonable amount.
Exactly.
I think we were a little too confident. So that's interesting. Is just to as long as your team is well informed, hey, support for a week. We're trying this. If anyone asks, we know it's confusing for this 1 week, but we're trying to learn.
Moreover, I would do like, split testing on multiple
Yeah.
pricing options at the same time. Why not? And
Okay.
see how those will perform.
Man, but so it's interesting about split testing. Are split testing prices legal? I feel like there's been discussions about this with like Amazon.
I don't know, man.
Okay, good.
I'm
Great.
talking from a technical perspective right now. Don't
Yes.
quote me as a lawyer here. I know in the past that was a practice.
Yes. Do some research. Then do some research to make sure, and then
Disclaimer: I'm not a lawyer.
But you still could do, maybe if people aren't, if I'm remembering this correctly, is you can advertise prices. So like, let's say you're saying, hey, this cell phone is $100, and you have an ad for that on Facebook. You can test how many people are clicking that ad, and then you can have another ad that says it's $80, and then you can do some conversion rate, do some estimates, and then on the checkout page they can all be the same price of $80, let's say. So the people who clicked on the $100 ad aren't paying the lower price. You can do some things where you advertise prices and then you still give everyone the lowest price, but you still get some data on the ad.
I would argue that it's not the same, because there's a difference between showing an ad and clicking on an ad versus actually swiping the credit card.
Yes.
Again, not a lawyer. My intuition that it should be okay, because let's look on enterprise sales, right? You sell the same thing to different organizations in completely in differences of millions.
Everyone knows that you need to make your homepage highly relevant to your audience to show them the next step that you want the audience to take. And that makes sense because it's the most visited page on your site. Now, for many businesses, there's another page that's often the second most visited page on the site, and we tend to spend very little time thinking about that page. So we're going to dig into that page, what you need to include on it, and even how you can get feedback from your customers on that page. I don't have a ton of experience in our pricing pages, and there are some best practices, right? And also maybe mistakes to avoid. So I would love to know, like, what are the mistakes you've seen on pricing pages that lose software developers easy money, that by designing a bad pricing page, you are actively losing money? What are the mistakes you've seen?
Yeah, there are many mistakes. I think the main mistake is that people don't invest in a pricing page at all. They just spend a lot of resources on the homepage and maybe their blog and everything. And then they neglect the pricing page because the assumption is that if you're there, that's it. It's just like you're ready to buy. But like, you need to remember that in most websites, if you have a pricing page and it's not hidden somewhere, it's the second most visited page after the homepage. Because that's what people want to know. They want to know what is the bottom line, right? But you don't want to, like, one option is just to show them the bottom line, but it's a missed opportunity. And I think that it is critical to think, we mentioned buyer's journey, but the pricing page is the page where you need to think about the buyer's journey. So if someone already went to a pricing page, there's intent behind it. Maybe they're not planning to buy it right away, but they're clearly interested in whatever you want to sell them. And now they're at this point that you have the opportunity to take them through this journey, to show them why they should do it, and preferably do it right now. And there are ways to do it. So I think that the main thing is to understand the importance of the pricing page, and also understand that many times, even if you have a fancy, homepage that lists down all the features and benefits, or like a dedicated features page, people will jump to the pricing page right away. Again, because of that mindset, tell me, how much do I need to pay?
Yeah.
So you need to ensure that, like, you educate them, you remove all the concerns that they have,
Mm-hmm.
add some urgency, right? Add social proof, reassurance, and take them through this kind of experience that convince them, oh, it looks like there's a good product. It's credible. I'm seeing, like, I don't know, influencers, it has high reviews or whatever. The support is great. I'm getting money back guarantee if I don't like it. Oh, there's a countdown here, right? A special discount that's happening right now. So all these kind of signals to try and convert them at the
Mm-hmm.
spot. So there is like a bunch of practices that you need to apply in order to have that buyer's journey, starting with a little education,
Yep.
through reassurance, social proof, etc., etc. And don't just, oh, the price is $100 per year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just give them that reassurance that, let's say, if they commit to buy, it's okay, they can get their money back. Like
Mm-hmm.
all these different signals that will help them to make the purchase decision.
Yeah, there's something about don't just show them the price, because I think if you just show the price, people think of it in one dimension. I think a price could scare away some consumers instantly, and if you say, "Here's all the stuff you get for this price," that's just a different conversation, is a different context. I took some notes here. I love what you said. Remove concerns. That's huge. That's like, does this work on WordPress.org? Yes, it works with WordPress.org. Great. Like, just a couple obvious things of, does this work with my product? Add urgency and add.
And
Okay.
preferably, those concerns should be removed by reviews from others that are
Mm-hmm.
actually using your product. So it's not you saying, oh, it works with WordPress.org, because you're biased, right, as
Mm-hmm.
the owner of the product. But if you have a quote from the customer that says, I've been using it on WordPress.org for
Yeah.
5 years, whatever, and it works amazingly, it's much stronger with someone else who is, like, less biased, is the one that's
Yes.
selling for you.
Yeah. I love that, and I always think social proof is underestimated. If you give me a quote from someone with no name and no image, it's close to a value zero. Whereas if you add an image, that's more. If you add a name, that's more. If you add a link to their website, that's better. If you have, and then probably the best stuff. I mean, there's probably just different levels of social proof here, but a video review of someone talking is probably the best. I don't know if that would send people
I,
off on a
I
tangent.
think in every target audience, there are, like, people who are influencers and known in the community. So
Yeah,
if you can get a
yeah,
quote from someone that is respected,
yeah,
right, in that niche, then it gives it a lot of credibility on
yeah.
top of all the other things. Also, there is the whole art of choosing the numbers and how you
Mm-hmm,
present those numbers.
mm-hmm.
Uh, like, it also depends on how you package it and how many packages you have and what billing cycles you offer, whether it's only monthly or monthly and annual. Should you show the annual prices in monthly increments, in annual increments? Like, there are so many things that are, like, once you acknowledge those, it's like
Mm-hmm.
everything, it's obvious, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, it's a no-brainer. But you need to kind of examine enough pricing pages to have that in your brains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me go back to the buyer's journey for a second, because I think this is I guess this is something that I'm always interested in: personas and persona research, and the buyer's journey, and trying to map the buyer's journey. And I always want data on, like, where's the first place you heard about us and stuff. Like, I try to, like, ask those questions, and I let's say you validated that people want your product, but you don't really know enough. You haven't maybe done customer interviews with them or something like that. How much research should you do on buyers before setting up a pricing page, or do you, like, do buyers research while also experimenting on the pricing page?
I think you could do all of those. Like one thing that I do recommend, especially early on or in sensitive times, like you said, where you want to change some things, is to have live chat
Oh,
on your
right.
website, because it's a great way to kind of engage with the person. And actually, like the question, how did you like get into this page? Like, was it Google? Did you hear about us from some blog post or whatever?
Mhm.
And especially if they have some question, right? So you first help them, you give them some value, and then you can ask, hey, would you mind if I ask you a question? And usually people don't have a problem to do that. So you can do kind of online little interviews with people who are actually on your site right now, and ask them whatever you want to learn. So this is a really great practice.
Yeah,
It's not scalable. This is why I
right.
said you need to do it either early on, where like you're still kind of exploring, and or in sensitive times that you do want to make changes. If you do have the capacity to have a live chat on your pricing page, it helps conversion a lot, because people see not only that I have all this, credibility, social
Hmm.
proof, money back guarantee, all this good stuff. I have a person here that is ready
Hmm.
to help me, and whatever concerns I have, I can like hopefully you can address them and convince the person.
In just a few moments, we're going to talk about how you can use psychology to build a pricing page around your target price point. We're going to get into some of our favorite books and talk about just a few principles that'll help you motivate users to become customers. So stick around. Okay, so the next question here is about psychology, and I'm super curious to hear about. So I took some psychology classes in college, but I don't think I know that much about psychology. What does a business owner need to know about psychology to help them with their pricing page?
I'm not a psychology expert, let me put it here, but I think I do understand the psychology behind buying stuff. And there are definitely a lot of like good literature of like financial decision making and things like that. I highly recommend books from Dan Ariely. um,
Yes.
he is amazing. All the experimentation, it's like mind blowing. First of all, you need to really understand your audience, their budget. I think it is also good to understand how they buy products, and you also need to understand like fundamental concepts, kind of universal. The smaller number you show them, the easier the buying decision, right? For example, the fact that we compare everything, this is critical. I've seen some, and Dana really talks a lot about this stuff. Like I've seen pricing pages where you just have, one number, that's it. And like the justification is, let's make our pricing simple. But when you just show one pricing point, and I'm still unsure that this is the company that I
Mm,
want to buy from, it increases the chance that, because I'm only seeing one number, that I would want to understand whether it's expensive, whether it's cheap, if I still don't have that knowledge. So what I will do is I will open another tab in my Chrome browser, right, and Google for alternatives.
yeah.
So I'm risking in losing the person just because I showed only single price. So
Hmm.
I think that there is this whole concept. I don't like this word, but price anchoring.
Yes.
This is the term that, in the way that you show numbers, like you can, let's assume that your audience is pretty homogeneous and it's like the
Hmm.
same type of buyers.
Hmm.
So there's no like agencies or freelancers that,
Hmm.
and things like that. Like, so you can kind of build a pricing experience in a way that when they look on the page, they see, okay, from all the pricing options, this is the best deal. So it gives them some, not reassurance, it gives them that comparison, that point of reference. I can buy for this, I can buy for that, and there's like multiple options, and from these options I see that this deal is the best and it's the best for me.
Hmm.
So if you have that on your pricing pages, it will increase the chance that the person will actually buy and won't jump to some other places to do some study, whether what they get actually makes sense. Because
Yeah.
just because they have that reference on the page already. And along, with the other things that I mentioned, like removing concerns, reassurance, it's all psychological concerns. People need to commit and swipe their credit card. So there are a list of things that can go wrong for them, starting from this product is not for me, or maybe it's like fraudulent. Maybe, I don't know, my credit card can get exposed for whatever reason. Maybe I just want to try it, but I don't want to commit. So anyway, there's a bunch of things I can think of. They all kind of, related to the things that we already discussed. So I don't want to mention the same things twice. But if you can narrow down, the question, I can be more specific.
Well, this is great. So you recommended one of the two books I was thinking of. So Dan Ariely, Predictably Irrational, which is an incredible book and talks about just how humans, like, we think we're logical, and we're nowhere near as logical as we think we are. We are weird creatures who follow weird patterns. So definitely recommend Dan Ariely, Predictably Irrational. And then the other one I was thinking of is Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. So there's something called the Cialdini Principles. And I think that's the book I was thinking of with this question, which is like, there's like a foot in the door strategy, which is, hey, we have a $5 mini ebook or a $10 mini course. And by offering, like, that's the foot in the door, people are bought into your, like, they buy this little tiny product, and now they're much more likely to buy a $200 product from you because you offer this little tiny thing. Then there's a list of these strategies, and literally strategies have like opposite. I forgot what the other one's called, but it's like you give them a really big number at first is a different strategy, and that works for this other psychological reason. It's kind of overwhelming, but also you just need to go, here's my customer. I've had 10 interviews with customers for an hour. So I spent 10 hours researching my customers, maybe a couple hours of live chat research and here's who I think they are and what they're like. I read this book. Here are 7 strategies. And you probably just want to pick one, maybe 2 and experiment, right? That's going back to your first point.
Yep.
Let's split test it. Here's the standard pricing page that we have now. Let's try adding some packages. Let's try an expensive package. And then what you said with price anchoring, right? It's easy with pricing pages to highlight one of the columns. Like most of this pricing page software gives you some way to, like, this is the most popular, this is the best deal, and it's bigger and bolder, and the first, it is a price on the left or whatever. Try each strategy and see which one works for you. Practices, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So anyways, anything on Robert Cialdini or I'm curious if you've heard his stuff or read his stuff or anything like that?
I didn't, but I have some thoughts about what you mentioned. Okay. So
yeah.
I'll be happy to share. My strategy, is usually to choose the price point you want your buyers to buy at, and then build everything around that price point to ensure that you funnel everyone, again, assuming your audience is relatively homogeneous. With that assumption, you want to pick a price point and build the entire experience so people get to that point, funneled into the decision. This is the number, this is the best deal that I want to buy it. And I think that I get that approach of, let them subscribe or, taste something in a small price, like do a trial for $1 or something like that. I think this strategy is definitely valid, but I would keep that as an exit strategy. What I mean by that is you show a regular pricing page, and then if you get signals from the browsing behavior that the person is about to leave, then it's the time to surface that, exit strategy. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned before that with your previous company where you did the experiment, you had a free tier, paid tier, and enterprise tier. Mm-hmm. I am generally against showing free tiers. It depends on the product, there are many disclaimers here. But what you can do is reveal that free tier at the end. If you see the person is about to abandon, right, you can show a pop-up and say, hey, by the way, did you know we have a free tier? Why don't you subscribe? As a last resort thing. Or if you don't have a free tier, show a pricing page. And then if they leave, why don't you want to try, subscribe to a trial, right? So you can leave those things like a last resort. But in the end, you do want to make money and convert people. So I would not highlight, free things and trials, and keep them for a later stage.
Yeah, I like that. I always think about cash flow as just the lifeblood of a business. And so getting pricing right means getting the right people to buy the right packages for them and for you. So
Yep.
you got to make sure that you're taking care of your business. There are definitely some cases to hide or to minimize the free tier.
I want to highlight that after you already have product market fit and everything, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to run those experiments. I know that, especially technical founders, creators love to build features, add more, because that's our passion, to create stuff.
Mhm.
But the impact on your bottom line that you can make by those optimizations of the pricing page is far greater than what you can do with any features that you will build, and it will take significantly less time.
Yeah.
It's just the energy, because I think it's like creators find it a little like boring. That's not the thing that you want to focus on. You want to create things, create value. But it's also important to create value for your company, because then you can reinvest that value into improving your support, into improving many things. It's definitely something that I can't stress enough the importance of running those optimizations.
I love that. So let me ask you a question then, because I guess I think so. You're probably right. Having worked at numerous software companies, let's say I'm going to say 5 to maybe 10% of features are the features that everyone loves and will buy your product for. But probably 90 to 95% of features are like, oh, it's like these. It's 10% of our audience likes this feature, or 15% of our audience likes this feature, and there's probably competitors who have those features. So it's like building one more feature generally doesn't help the business. If you look at a random sample of 100 features, probably 5 of them drive your business for the next year.
Yep.
Pricing is definitely an afterthought at a lot of the places that I've been at, and it's something. Sometimes it's like, hey, we here literally this has happened. We built this incredible plugin. It does all these features. How do we sell it? I don't know. Bob will come up with the price and we'll put it on the website on Monday.
Right.
Oh, like it's like an afterthought, right? Pricing is clearly an afterthought that one random guy did a while ago and now is doing it for the rest of his job. But is that no one's really thinking about it? You should have someone on your team thinking about it.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, who should be thinking about it on your team?
I think it depends on the size of the company. I would say, in the space we're at, which is like lifestyle software businesses, it's the founders, whether it's a CEO or whatever, name you want to call that, that's usually the founders' role to figure out the pricing. One more point, I'm slightly shifting back, but I think it's pretty important, and we didn't mention that. One of the mistakes that I'm also seeing in pricing pages is underpricing. And it especially coming from the eastern side of the world and more developing countries, because there's perception, like we discussed about it a lot, right? Like the way we perceive prices is based on our experience, on the prices that we've seen, on the cost of living, etc. And I've seen so many times people from less Western countries that for them they charge this number and they think, oh, that's like amazing, if I can sell 10 licenses of that per week, it's incredible. But connecting that to the point that prices have to make sense when it comes to the perception of the potential buyer, like you have to adjust it to the market. If you're selling, let's say we're talking about WordPress plugins, if you price your product for $20 and that's it, to a Western, let's say American person, it smells fishy. Something is wrong here.
Yeah.
Either the code is broken, or they're gonna steal my credit card, or whatever. Even if it's an amazing product, and the fact that you live in, I don't know, in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, whatever, doesn't mean that the quality of the software is not good there. But the cost of living is so much cheaper. So for them, $20 is perceived like $200 in the States. So you have to adjust prices, and you need to think about what is my primary, market. If I'm targeting the Western market, if I do want to sell globally, I can choose different numbers if I do have the tool to actually offer different numbers to different countries.
I was going to ask that. Is that I feel like I've only seen bigger companies have, I forgot what they're even called, but geographically like restricted prices where literally if your IP address is in England, then we show you this price, and if your IP address is in India, we show you this price. Is that, I feel like that's like far down the line. That's like once you figured out the basics of pricing and your packaging, then you add geographic adjustments.
Let's call that localization as part of the
Localization.
experience,
Yeah,
right?
it is. What, but that's pretty far down the line, right? Like people who are just getting started probably need to think where's the biggest collection of customers and use that for all of their pricing. Is that maybe the right 80/20 there?
I think generally, like yes, start in in everything that you start, focus on the primary thing, right? On
Mm-hmm.
the biggest market, but there is no reason not to do it early on because in the same matter, if you sell something for $200, right, and you try to also sell it in India, it won't sell there. So if you want to be more accessible to a global market, like why not? I think there are like tools today that it's pretty easy to accommodate that. It's just a
Okay.
matter of set up the numbers.
Okay.
But another problem is that many makers think that or not think that they're building everything themselves. And if you do build everything yourself, it becomes further down the line.
Mm-hmm.
But if you choose platforms, and today there are many platforms, Freemius and many others,
Mm-hmm.
that you can very easily accommodate these capabilities.
Sometimes you'll hear business advice like never sell lifetime licenses. And while that may be good advice, there is an argument on the other side, and you can make a lot of money if you price your product just right. So stick around for the math on lifetime licenses. Ooh, math. Yes, we're getting nerdy in here. I want to talk about lifetime licenses just because I know we've seen that a lot. I feel like everyone sold lifetime licenses. And maybe that's, you know what? That's how software was sold, right? Like early editions of Photoshop is you buy the CD of Photoshop on CD, and you have
Yep.
that until the CD breaks. You have that forever. But I think some industries still have lifetime licenses for software. So is that a viable strategy? And I guess should businesses offer lifetime licenses, and is it a viable strategy?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. I think it also depends on the type of software. There's a big difference between distributed software, like you said, when you get a copy of Windows or whatever, right? You have the CD, it's with you. Even though the support was limited, you didn't get
Mm,
lifetime support. It was still for, I don't know, a year, 3 years, whatever, versus SaaS, where you actually, as long as you use the product, you consume some resources. There are expenses. Even if you don't offer support, something goes into that. I think generally lifetime licenses can work for some products.
mm,
It doesn't mean that you need to. So if we're looking at WordPress ecosystem, right, there is the billing cycle, but there is also the number of activations, like on how many websites you can use the product.
mhm,
So I'm against unlimited, okay, lifetime unlimited, because that's a problem. But lifetime is not necessarily bad. And today those are called, LTDs, lifetime deals, which is like the popular term. And AppSumo is the king in
mhm,
lifetime deals. This is what they do in
mhm,
their marketplace. I think for some products, it does make sense. If we're talking about distributed software, or any other software, regardless, I would never offer lifetime support. Even if you
mhm,
allow using the product forever, I would
mhm,
not do lifetime support. The second point that I wanted to mention is that if you look on different statistical like insights, most businesses don't really survive after 5 years. And it's relatively rare when you sell subscriptions that someone will stick with you for 5 years. It's
mhm.
usually not happening. So if you price your lifetime license or product correctly, uh, theoretically you are maximizing your customer lifetime value, right? Because you're
Right,
getting everything up front.
right.
You need to price it right, like three,
Mhm,
4 times your, maybe 5 times your annual product. I would also say that you don't want to do that to support intensive products. So if you know that you're getting a lot of like technical issues and all of that, so you probably want to be extra careful with that. That's the kind of the thinking behind that. Can you really price it in a way that will eventually increase your bottom line without risking an abuse?
Yeah. But there's so many businesses that people think they're going to run for the rest of their lives, and they run it for 6 months and then realize it's hard. And if you offer them a
Yep.
lifetime license, you get 4.5 years for free, right? Like they kind of stop using it at 6 months, and you get
Yep.
4.5 years for free. And it pays
Yep.
for all the people who lasted 6 years or 7 years and used a
Yeah.
little bit more than you expected. I love that.
And I want to get back to what I said in the beginning,
Please.
which was if your product is something for a short term, like immediate use, that's a great product for a lifetime license, like the migration thing, because you don't use it often, right? So the support is something that is relatively, infrequent. So it's actually makes sense because if you'll sell, let's take to the extreme, something monthly, like you will have to charge significantly less, but the churn will be huge because you only need to use it now, right?
To me, the biggest and hardest part of pricing is packaging. And it's really like, okay, I know freelancers use my software and I know agencies use my software. Do I need two plans? Do that just, or do I have like, and you can call one freelancer, call one agency, or do I have a pro plan that could kind of work for both? You can have, again, you can have 100 features and 80% of your users care about these 20 features out of the 100. Okay, is that a plan? How, and then are the rest of the plans 50 features, 80 features, 100 features? It just seems overwhelming, I guess. Like a packaging
Yeah,
seems overwhelming to me. I assume it seems overwhelming to other people who are listening. How do you figure out packaging and pricing?
absolutely. I think it's kind of an art, and also a matter of pattern recognition. So if you've seen enough of those and understand the psychology and have a strategy, it becomes like easier. So let's go with the strategy of choosing like one price point where you want to funnel as much buyers into that price point as possible. So if you want people to buy that, you would want, for example, to put your killer feature in that package, right? So adding pricing psychology. So you would most likely want to have that plan as the middle plan, right? Not the cheapest, but not the most expensive. So let's say we have 3 tiers, which is kind of the traditional structure. So the killer feature will not be in the cheapest plan, right? Because you want to show the cheapest plan and the middle plan where you're targeting that the numbers will be pretty close, right? We're talking about like comparing things. So they will have that anchor, but the difference will be slight increase in the price, but the killer feature will be in that main plan. So, I need this, plus the difference is meaningless. I don't know, $1 a month or something like that. But I get so much more here, plus the killer feature. So this is like one way to package. You talked about different like audiences. Let's say I'm targeting freelancers and agencies. So hopefully you have features that are more relevant to agencies and features that are more relevant to freelancers. So you like about the naming, it's another topic by itself, but you can position the relevant feature in the relevant package. Or another approach is if you know that subset of your audience is using the product on e-commerce, and you know that when it's on e-commerce, people usually have a bigger budget. It's like it's clearer the path and the value of what you're offering to them. So you can also charge that, like put the e-commerce specific features in a higher tier.
Right.
But definitely that practice of just like limiting the number of activations or the number of users, it's not optimal. And the reason it's not optimal, if we're talking about number of, let's say, site activations like happening in WordPress, unless your audience is specifically like agencies that they do have more websites, if you do structure your pricing based, like the only difference is the number of activations, then for sure I can guarantee that 95% of the sales will be the single site license. So immediately, most people will buy the cheapest plan. Or the same thing with if it's like per seat pricing, right? For one. So again, depends who you are targeting. But if your target audience is usually like companies or like a single person, that you're immediately like pushing everyone to the cheapest plan, and people will be blind to the others. It doesn't matter all the pricing, practices and psychology things that you'll put in place is simply irrelevant to them. The way I approach those packages is, in addition to limiting the whatever is the resource there, also differentiate by features. So it's not only by user sites or API calls, whatever, but also add additional value to higher tiers. And again, preferably put your killer feature in the package that you want most people to buy.
So I love all this advice. You know what I think my challenge is I can think of examples where everyone did all those things, all those best practices wrong. Let me give you one example. This is years ago. I'm going to pick on a company, but I'm only going to pick on them because they've changed their pricing since it was this way. Years ago, I had a WordPress.com account for a hobby site. Like I paint the little tiny toy miniatures and I wanted to put pictures of them. And I wanted just to have Google Analytics installed on the website. The pricing for that, WordPress.com they scanned your brain and they read it and they said, you know what? We're going to put a killer feature, Google Analytics tracking, and our highest plan. So I had to decide between no tracking for $0 a month or $200 a month and sorry, this is basic Google Analytics. This is including a script. So as a developer, it's like one line of JavaScript, add some PHP for the UA code. And I know how unbelievably simple it is. I know how simple it is in WordPress. And I just want to have Google Analytics again, this is just a hobby site. And in the end, I didn't buy it and I didn't buy any plan because they put what I thought was a really simple feature at a $200 a month plan because it was the killer feature that probably everyone wants. Everyone wants to track their website data. But I probably would have bought a $30 a month plan. So it seems impossible, where I think they were following probably some sort of best practice of the killer feature that everyone wants. Let's put it on a more expensive plan, but it was so expensive. And I know how trivial it was to implement that I never bought anything. So I think that, I guess this all comes back to, you just have to experiment, right? You put it in the $200 plan for a month, see what sales are like. Maybe you move that feature.
Well, maybe you're not the best buyer for them. I don't know what went into that. Yeah, exactly. I don't know what went into that thought process behind it. But in the end, this is how they decided. Maybe it was just a mistake. Sounds like a mistake.
I think they've changed it since then. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's all about the decision. If you know that you're intentionally putting like something that is like relatively obvious, right? Adding something like Google Analytics in the $200 tier, then maybe that's your the target price that you want to get.
Sometimes the simplest changes have the most profound effects on your business. What if you just changed your pricing one day? What if you were selling a product for $5 a month and you doubled it to $10 a month? Would you lose any customers? Vova actually has some history with this, so keep tuning in to hear how he raised prices before customers started to drop off. Looking back, what would you have done differently with any of the pricing pages for your products? Were there any fails? And if there were fails, how would you turn them into successes?
Yeah, so there were two big lessons that I learned. One with my side project. It was my first kind of small SaaS, side gig that I decided to monetize. And I had a lot of users, and my perception was, let's sell the paid plan for $1, and convert everyone. That was the perception, And that was the first package, $1. You get all the paid features basically. And I had conversion, but I didn't become rich out of it, I mean, I saw that the conversion was follow the benchmarks of the internet, which is, I don't know, like 2%, something like that back then. And then I started to experiment, increase it to $2, I see no change in conversion, $3, $4, $5. It's the same conversion, nothing changes until I got to 2 digits. So that was kind of the experimentation. But I had this kind of assumption that if I will price it very low, it will remove the whole price concern in the decision making, but it didn't. And it's also the same with the enterprise sales story that I said. Like our perception was we wanted to secure someone like France Telecom, right? So we didn't want to charge crazy numbers or something like that. So we wanted to eliminate that concern, but it's not the way it works. In the end of the day, the person need to you don't want to price it too high, right? So there is some range, but whether it's in the low end or in the high end, and this is why experimentation is so critical, to figure out what is this max number that you can get to without affecting conversion rate. So this was one kind of lesson learned, that if you sell something for $1, it doesn't mean anything. And the second one is actually with Freemius. So when I started Freemius, there was nothing like it in the market. Maybe there are some of the competitors today, they were just starting out. And I was kind of comparing ourselves to the wrong competitors. For me, I looked at Freemius. Okay, we solve a lot of operational headaches similar to what marketplaces are doing. So the initial pricing of Freemius was this. How I didn't get any customers this way, but it just tells the importance of pricing. I priced it at 30% because my perception was I wanted to target people who have free products. And I said, okay, let's give them an offering, something that will help them very easily convert their free users into paid. And my assumption was that I will have a surge of developers from WordPress.org jumping to use Freemius, and because they all really passionate about their plugins, and I did a discovery, and they all wanted to kind of hope if they had an option to focus on that as their full time. So for me was, okay, right now you don't make any money. We can offer you a product that can help you start making money right away from your free users. And we'll charge 30% because that's how marketplaces are charging. And we're solving the same payments, subscriptions, billing, all this stuff. Obviously, no one subscribed, so that was the wrong pricing. And it was also hard to really understand that it was the wrong pricing. But I went to conferences and sat down with people and why won't you sign up, and I actually think that it was Syed Balki that told me, man, you're crazy. The percentage here, it doesn't make any sense. No one will buy into that. He was the first one that I think that was open and transparent. I know it's hard for Americans, maybe because his roots are not from America, to actually say what do you think. And then I started to rethink prices, and we ended up with the price point that we have right now, which is 7%. Meaningful difference, of course, but it made a difference. So that was another lesson. You need to, if you are looking in the competitive landscape, sometimes is when you come up with something new, you can't really replicate existing pricing models. So you need to, if it's new, you potentially need to kind of invent, and come up with different ideas.
Yeah, you gotta compare yourself to the right people, the right companies, the right orgs. Yeah, right. Like Apple and Google, the Apple Marketplace and the Google Marketplace are kind of monopolies for their own softwares. So they can charge 30% if they want, whereas you are not. So that's super interesting. That's a good lesson, and also a good lesson that I just took away from that is when something doesn't work, just keep asking questions. Because ultimately, I'm the type of person where I want to know why something doesn't work. And it sounds like you figured it out. It was oh, that's a crazy high percentage. Let's drop the percentage. But if you, there's a lot of people who wouldn't go through all that effort and they wouldn't never learn what happens, and they'd probably just give up and try to build something else. So love that story. And it's a story about Freemius to end this episode. Vova, this has been great. Thank you for coming onto the show.
Thanks for hosting me.
And thanks to our listeners for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, our only ask is that you send it to a friend. We want to help as many entrepreneurs as possible. Plugin.fm is brought to you by Freemius, your all-in-one payments, subscriptions, and taxes platform for selling software, plugins, themes, and software as a service. If you're struggling to grow your software revenue, send a note to contact@freemius.com to get free advice from Freemius's monetization experts. My name is Patrick Rolland, and thanks for listening to Plugin.fm.